You are born into frost. Not just snow, not a winter storm, not even the bitterest cold your modern imagination can conjure, but into a planet held hostage by an endless siege of ice. The sky above you is pale and heavy, not with clouds, but with light that does not warm. Wind whips across the open plains in long, howling ribbons, scouring everything soft and living. Trees exist only as twisted ghosts clinging to the edge of the world, and the ground is stone or frozen earth, unforgiving and sharp beneath bare feet. There is no comfort here, no warmth, only the raw presence of survival. You are small. Your limbs ache with cold before you even understand what cold is. Your lungs burn each time you inhale the glassy air. Your only protection is skin, firelight, and others like you, huddled, quiet, wary. You are born not into safety, but into consequence. Every breath costs something. Every movement risks something. And still, you are alive. The Ice Age is no single moment. It is a reign, a dominion. And you were not meant to survive it. Not as an apex predator, not as the planet's future. The mammoths tower over you. The saber-toothed cats stalk your trails. The wolves hunt in packs, silent and grey. The cold alone is a killer more ruthless than any claw or fang. It seeps into bones, finds the weak, the slow, the old, the newborn. It takes what it wants. But so do you. You are not the strongest. You are not the fastest. You do not have claws, nor fangs, nor thick hides. But you have something else, something dangerous. Your body may be fragile, but inside it, a fire stirs. It is not warmth, it is thought. You learn to observe, to remember, to connect. You learn not just to move, but to choose your movement. You begin to ask why the wind shifts when it does, why the reindeer return each year along the same paths, why the stars move above you in patterns that seem to whisper. The earth around you is vast and indifferent. Glaciers hundreds of feet high creep across the land like sleeping titans. Oceans are locked beneath ice. But you don't simply endure this world. You read it. You map it. You find meaning in it. And slowly, almost impossibly, you begin to shape it. But first comes fire. The nights are so cold, you wonder how breath doesn't freeze inside your throat. Your body curls around others for warmth, furs heaped above and below, and still the cold finds a way in. You ache with it. And then, one night, a flicker, distant, orange, dancing like a spirit. Fire, not just light in the dark, but defiance against it. Not just warmth, but agency. You did not make it yet, but someone did. Someone in your band, or another, struck stone against stone and conjured a miracle. It hisses, it breathes, it eats wood and bone and spits out safety. You stare into it and feel something awaken inside you. The idea that you might fight back against this world. The fire becomes more than tool, it becomes ritual. It is the heart of your camp, the center of your circle, where food is made soft, where stories are told, where weapons are sharpened, where songs are murmured into smoke. It is a memory keeper, a guardian, and it is never left alone. The cold has forced you to become caretakers, not just of flame, but of each other. You cannot survive alone. One spark, one ember, can mean life for dozens. So you learn to feed it, to cradle it in dry moss, to carry it across tundra wrapped in bark and hope. You walk with it, sleep beside it, protect it from the wind as if it were your child. This is your first true invention. Not fire itself, but its preservation. The knowledge that what matters most must be guarded, passed on, honored. And in doing so, something else kindles within you. A sense of time, a sense of continuity, a sense of legacy. You begin to remember. Memory in this age is not abstract. It is physical. You remember the path to the river not just in your mind, but in your legs. You remember the taste of poisonous berries in your gut. You remember loss in the silence of a cold place where someone once sat beside you and no longer does. And yet, you press forward. You are not alone. Around you the others stir, men and women with the same sharp eyes, the same cautious movements, the same hunger. Children clutch at scraps of hide. Elders murmur warnings. The young already mimic flint knapping and spear thrusts. No one is idle. No one is safe. And so you work. You learn. You adapt. You begin to take from the world what it does not offer freely. You hunt. You scrape hides. You test the marrow of bones. You use what the predators leave behind, the sinew, the horn, the teeth. Waste is not an option. Everything is precious. But the cold never relents. One night, as you lie beside the fire, you hear the ice groaning in the distance, deep and long like the belly of a giant turning in its sleep. A reminder that even now, even with flame in your hands and knowledge in your skull, the world is vast and hungry and wants you gone. And still, you resist. Because something inside you has changed. You are no longer just a body trying to survive a season. You are a mind trying to outlast an era. And that fire you carry? It's not just in your hands anymore. It's in your thoughts. It's the question that won't go away. What else can we do? You learn to carry fire as if it were breath. Not just to light it. Not just to warm your limbs and roast a carcass. But to keep it alive. Because out here, in the killing cold, fire is not just a tool. It's your heartbeat made visible. And fire is fickle. One gust of wind, one patch of damp tinder, one moment of carelessness, and the world returns to darkness. You remember the first time you saw it die, how your breath fogged the air in growing panic, how the fire gave one last flicker and was gone. The warmth vanished so fast your joints locked. You watched the frost reclaim everything, and then you understood. It's not enough to make fire. You must become its steward. So you learn. You learn to carry embers wrapped in dry fungus and moss, sealed inside a hollowed antler or a turtle shell. You carry it in satchels against your chest during migrations. When you move camp, someone always walks with the ember bundle strapped tight like a sacred relic. Because it is one. It's the soul of your people. The promise that night won't eat you whole. Every morning begins with its coaxing, gently breathing it back to life, feeding it slivers of bark, whispering heat into being. You learn to read fire like a living thing, when it wants more fuel, when it's angry, when it's weak, when it's dangerous. It teaches you patience, observation, foresight. Because fire gives, but it also takes. a sleeping child's hair too close to the coals, a hut of brush that goes up in seconds. One careless spark, and everything you've built can vanish. You fear fire. You revere it. You talk to it sometimes when you're alone. You treat it like a god. But gods must be kept. This new relationship with flame changes you, not just practically, but socially. No longer is survival an individual task. Fire is communal. Someone must gather the wood. Someone must guard it while the hunters are gone. Someone must teach the children how to tend it without burning their fingers. You become a species that protects things together, and that changes everything. At first, your camps were just sleeping clusters near cliffs or tree roots, temporary places to wait out a storm. But now, the fire anchors you. You begin to form circles around it, speak across it, eat in its glow. Its crackling becomes the rhythm of your rituals. Around it, your band shares silence and story. You sing. You don't know where the songs come from. But around the fire, in the long dark, they emerge, low and rhythmic, echoing the breath of the flames. You hum while mending hides, chant while cracking bones for marrow. The sound keeps fear at bay. It gives the night shape. And around this fire, ideas spread. You notice that when someone sharpens their flint a certain way, it cuts better. That when fat wood is laid beneath damp logs, the fire burns cleaner. You watch. You imitate. You teach. The fire becomes a school, your first classroom. And sometimes it becomes something more. You watch shadows dance on cave walls, figures flicker and twist in the flame's light, giants, animals, ancestors. You start to see patterns, a bison's charge, a bear's lumbering sway, the human form bent over a spear. You trace these shapes in ash and ochre. You begin to tell stories, not just of what happened, but what might. The fire becomes a theater. A child asks, "What lives beyond the glacier?" Someone answers with a tale of spirits, of a sky beast with horns of ice, of the first flame born in a crack of lightning. No one interrupts. You all listen, because in that moment, whether it's truth or not, no longer matters. What matters is the telling, the memory. The fire holds it all. It becomes the place where the past lives, where the dead are remembered, where names are given, where alliances are forged and lovers are chosen. It is the hearthstone of your humanity. But fire demands fuel, and that means the forest. You venture farther for wood, risking frostbite, risking predators. You learn to track fallen trees, to strip bark, to fell saplings without dulling your blades. You learn to stack wood so it dries, to identify which branches crack and which hiss and die. Every fire you tend now is also a lesson in ecology. The ice teaches you nothing is free. Every log burned is a debt to the land. Every ember carried is a burden on the body. But the heat it gives, that's freedom. You can now sleep through the longest nights. You can thaw frozen meat. You can dry hides. You can boil water and make it safe. You can survive. And that shifts everything. The fire stretches your lifespan, lets you endure wounds, lets your elders live long enough to teach what they know. And those teachings build upon themselves. No one starts from zero anymore. You begin each day not with fear, but with inheritance, because of fire. It lets you eat what you couldn't before. Roast sinew, dry fish, preserve meat. You can carry food across distances. Stay longer in one place. Feed more mouths. And as your bellies fill, so do your imaginations. And in the firelight, you begin to wonder, if we can tame this, what else might bend to our will? There, in the warmth, a new question stirs, one that will change the world forever. What if you hunted the monsters instead of just running from them? You stare into the snow-covered horizon, and you understand. If you want to survive, you must eat more than scraps, more than roots and roasted grubs. The cold burns too many calories, and the winters last too long. Hunger is not a passing discomfort. It is a predator in your belly. It gnaws your muscles, dulls your mind, makes your fingers slow when the spear must fly true. You need fat. You need meat. And not just any meat. The reindeer herds drift like rivers of life across the plains, but they are fast, wary, and strong. The bison travel in thunderous clusters, protected by horns and hooves. The mammoths, they are the gods of this age. A walking wall of flesh and fury, each one a mountain draped in shaggy warmth. To bring one down would mean weeks of food, bone for tools, hide for shelter, blubber for fire. But to try is to gamble with death. You are not built to be a predator. You have no claws. Your teeth are blunt. Your legs are not fast enough, your arms not strong enough. But you have something else. You have strategy. You have persistence. And you have each other. So you learn to hunt not with brute force, but with time. The technique is brutal and elegant. Persistence hunting. You don't sprint. You follow, track, haunt. You spot a reindeer at dawn and stalk it into the afternoon. The animal runs, flees, stops to pant, flees again. You stay just out of reach, reading its prints, listening for its wheezing breath, watching for the quiver in its legs. You chase it to exhaustion, not as wolves do in a flash of violence, but as ghosts of inevitability. You turn stamina into a weapon. Eventually, the reindeer stumbles, collapses, and your hand does not shake as you drive the flint tip home. Not because you are cruel, but because this is life. You offer a silent breath of thanks. And then, the real work begins. You cut with purpose. The blades are chipped from stone. Obsidian, if you are lucky, its edges sharper than any modern steel. The skin comes off in long, steaming sheets. The organs are removed quickly. The liver is warm and rich and eaten first. You feel the iron spread through your blood like lightning. The fat is hoarded, precious as gold. Nothing is wasted. Bones are cracked for marrow. Tendons become cord. The stomach is cleaned and used to carry water. The hooves boiled down to glue. Even the teeth are treasured, worn as trophies, charms, or tools. You do not kill to waste. You kill to live. But soon, one animal is not enough. Your people begin to organize. You set traps. Pits lined with sharpened stakes, disguised with snow. You study migration patterns and lie in wait at the narrow passes. You learn to use the terrain, steep slopes, ravines, frozen rivers, to box in prey. You develop signals, hand gestures, low whistles, body movement in synchronicity. The hunt becomes a dance, each of you a limb of one coordinated body. And when the spear flies, It is not a random throw. It is the end of a story told with sweat, patience, and blood. You invent the atlatl, a spear thrower, a simple tool that extends your arm and multiplies your force. Suddenly, your reach doubles. You can strike from a distance too far for hooves to retaliate. With it, you gain an edge, and still, the prey grows wiser. The mammoths begin to avoid the kill zones. The reindeer alter their paths. The bison scatter at the faintest scent of your sweat. So you adapt again. You paint their movements on cave walls, not for beauty, but as strategy. A map of muscle and memory. You share what you see with those too young to hunt. The wall becomes a classroom, the image, a teacher. But meat does more than feed your body. It fuels your brain, the fat, the protein. These build the scaffolding of thought. Your mind sharpens. You begin to anticipate, not just react. You start noticing patterns, making plans for weeks ahead. The hunt teaches you about time, about cycles. You begin to understand that survival isn't just about what happens today. It's about what you set in motion for tomorrow. The more you hunt, the more you must move. The animals migrate, and so do you. You learn to read the land like a scroll, where the ice is thinner, where the moss grows thicker, where the wind will carry your scent away. You store these details in your head, share them at night, refine them around the fire. And with every story passed down, the hunt becomes less guesswork and more science. And you realize something strange. The predators of this world, the wolves, the cats, the great bears, they hunt alone or in bloodlines. But you hunt across generations. The father teaches the son the path of the herds. The mother shows the daughter how to read broken branches. The dead still speak through memory and instruction. This is your weapon. And yet, sometimes, it still isn't enough. You remember the long winter when no herds came, when the wind froze your nostrils shut and the furs were never thick enough, when your fire dimmed and your stomach turned against itself. You chewed old leather. You boiled bones already picked clean. You buried one of your own beneath stone and snow. That year, you became scavengers. You followed the vultures, tracked the wolves, learned to wait until they left the remains. Sometimes you fought them off, shouting, waving fire, risking bites. Sometimes you ate side by side, not enemies, but desperate cousins. And when even that failed, you turned inward. You remembered how to fast, how to sleep in hibernation-like stillness, how to tell stories not to pass time, but to forget hunger, and how to hope, thin, flickering but alive, that the herds would return. They did. And when they did, you hunted not just with relief, but with vengeance, with the full force of what you'd learned. The ice had tried to starve you, but it only made you more dangerous. Now, when you walk the tundra, you do so with meat in your pouch, a spear in your hand, and fire in your eyes. And you begin to wonder, if you could defeat hunger, what other tools might sharpen your edge? You stare at the flint in your hand, and for the first time, you don't just see a rock, you see potential. A sharp edge, a cutting tool, a future. It's not the first time you've used a stone, but it's the first time you've really understood it. Not as something found, but as something made. This is the moment your survival shifts from instinct to innovation. You begin to experiment. You test different stones, flint, obsidian, chert, learning which ones fracture cleanly, which slice flesh, which shatter under stress. You discover that with the right strike, a rock can flake into blades finer than any claw, more lethal than any tooth. The work is delicate. You cradle the core stone in your palm, angle your hammerstone just right, and strike with precision. Too hard, and the whole thing snaps. Too soft, and nothing flakes. But when you get it right, a perfect sliver, sharp as ice, thin as a whisper. It becomes a ritual, the rhythm of flint napping, the meditative tap-tap-snap that echoes through your camp like a heartbeat. Soon your pouch is full of tools, not just blades, but scrapers, burins, awls, each with a purpose. You use them to butcher meat, carve wood, shape bone, slice hides. Each one is a finger extended beyond flesh. Your mind reaches further through stone. You do not just react to the world anymore. You reshape it. The blade in your hand becomes an extension of thought. What if it were longer, curved, fitted to a shaft? You invent hafting, binding stone to wood with sinew and resin. Your weapons grow in reach and strength. A hand axe becomes a spear, a scraper becomes a drill, a sliver becomes a saw. Now your survival is no longer about the strength of your body, but the sophistication of your brain. Your hands, once only instruments of grasping and tearing, are now tools of design. You don't just gather what nature gives, you manufacture what nature never intended. And this transforms your relationship with the world. You begin to see every object not as what it is, but what it could be. A mammoth tusk, a digging tool, a bone shard, a sewing needle, a dead tree, a spear shaft, a shelter pole, a signal fire, the snow itself, a trap, a refrigerator, a disguise. This shift from passive use to active manipulation marks your true awakening as a technologist. You begin to standardize your tools. The blades become consistent in shape. The handles are crafted to fit the hand. Tools are no longer one-off improvisations, but replicable designs. You develop muscle memory, a sequence of steps passed from elder to apprentice, from generation to generation. And in that repetition, something unexpected blooms. Style. A curved edge here, a carved grip there, etched marks along the shaft. Not functional, but expressive. For the first time, the line between survival and art begins to blur. The tool becomes a signature. You find pieces discarded by others from other groups, and you recognize them, not just as tools, but as belonging to someone. Their shape tells a story. Their maker leaves a fingerprint of thought. And from this arises a startling idea. The knowledge in your hands might outlive you. This is the birth of legacy. You start hiding extra blades in specific places, cached beneath stones, tucked in tree hollows. You mark their locations with patterns of branches or painted signs. Not for you, but for someone else. Someone in your clan. Or maybe even a stranger. Someone human. And in this act, you become more than a survivor. You become a planner, a collaborator, a kind of prophet even. You now shape stone with an eye toward futures you may never see. But tools also change how you move. Your sharpened flint allows you to cut trees for poles, which leads to better shelters. Your burins let you carve joints and notches, which leads to stronger, more stable constructions. Your scrapers prepare hides faster, which means warmer clothing, which means longer journeys. Your toolkit becomes a passport, each blade another step further into the unknown, and it protects you. The first time you face down a predator with a tipped spear instead of a sharp stick, you feel the difference. The beast growls, lowers its head, and dies before it ever reaches you. You do not run. You stand. Because now you have leverage. Now you have options. And the tools do not remain primitive. You attach multiple blades to a single shaft. You shape bone handles to fit better in your grip. You carve notches that allow your weapons to pierce deeper. You discover that a serrated edge, jagged like a shark's tooth, tears flesh more viciously than a smooth one. Each innovation brings new questions. Could this be better? What if it were lighter, sharper, thicker? You aren't just surviving the Ice Age anymore, you're engineering through it. And others begin to notice. You encounter new bands on the move, strangers. You trade, food for flint, blades for antler. You study each other's tools, copy what works, improve what doesn't. Knowledge spreads like fire, passing from hand to hand, evolving with every retelling. You are no longer a single tribe of problem solvers. You are a network of engineers, scattered across continents, united by a shared language of invention. And even now, your stone blade glows faintly in the firelight, proof that the Ice Age did not crush you. It sharpened you. But the blade alone is not enough. To shape the world, you must also bind it. Clothing, shelters, traps, and tribes, all held together by a single revolutionary thread. Thread. You don't think of it as a miracle at first. Just a strip of sinew, a twisted fiber, a sliver of something once alive, now tamed. But in your world, where cold seeps into the bones, where the wind tears at every seam, where survival depends on what stays together, it is a miracle. A strip of hide becomes clothing, but clothing doesn't hold without something more. A stitch, a thread, a way to keep the world from unraveling. That's where the bone needle comes in. It is tiny, fragile, often lost in the snow or between stones. And yet, it is one of the most powerful inventions you will ever create. You carve it with care. A shard of bone, honed to a point. A small eye drilled through the base with a burin. Steady hands, sharper tools, infinite patience. The first time you pass sinew through that opening and push it through hide, the world shifts. Two pieces become one. A whole becomes whole. And for the first time, you can truly make clothes that fit. Before, you wore hides like capes, bulky, slipping, inefficient. Now you wear sleeves, leggings, hoods that hug the skull, boots that bind tightly around the ankle. Your garments seal in heat, shed wind, hold their shape even in storms. You become wrapped in precision, not just protection. This changes everything. You move farther, sleep warmer, work longer. The infants survive more winters, the elders live more years, and your hands are free to carry, to gesture, to build. All because the cold no longer owns your skin. The needle is not loud. It does not roar like fire or pierce like a spear. It whispers. And yet it holds your entire world together. Quite literally, thread by thread. You teach others. At first, just those in your band. Then others when they visit or pass by. Stitching becomes ceremony. Patterns emerge. Not just for strength, but for beauty. A certain way of looping sinew becomes your clan's mark. A colored stitch on a child's sleeve says they are protected. Thread becomes language. You begin to sew more than clothes. You stitch pouches to carry tools, slings to carry babies, nets to fish rivers, to snare birds, straps to bind weapons. Every new loop expands your reach. Every new knot solves another problem. And you start to see the world differently, not just in terms of objects, but connections. A tool is not just blade and handle. It is how the two are joined. A shelter is not just poles and hide. It is how they're lashed. Even people are not just individuals. They're sewn together by story, by shared burdens, by invisible threads of trust and memory. You are becoming a weaver, not just of garments, but of complexity. Soon your hands crave better fibers. You start experimenting. You shred bark from trees, twist it with your fingers. It snaps. So you twist it again. Tighter, wetter, slower. Suddenly it holds. Plant fiber, cordage, rope. You braid. You knot. You twist strands into cables that can drag sleds across ice. You bind logs for rafts. You reinforce shelters. You hang drying racks for meat, stretch frames for hides, even string bows for hunting. From this, tension is born. Precision, force. Thread becomes power. You invent looms of a kind, simple frameworks of bone or wood. You pass the fibers back and forth. Weaving becomes its own skill, its own art. You learn to make mats, blankets, even walls. And with this, softness enters your life. A woven cradle, a fiber-wrapped handle, a padded garment for a newborn. For the first time, the idea of comfort sneaks in. Not luxury, but relief. The sense that, for a moment, you are not simply defending against the world, but improving your place in it. But thread also brings new responsibilities. If a stitch breaks, a boot fails. If a sling tears, a baby falls. Suddenly, maintenance becomes just as important as invention. You learn to inspect, to test, to repair. You become not just a maker, but a custodian of things. You develop memory for materials. The thigh sinew is better than the back. Gut stretches but dries brittle. Plant fiber needs to be soaked. Animal hair can be spun fine, but breaks in frost. Each material has a mood, a season, a story, and you learn them all. And so do the others, because these skills cannot stay secret. You are too vulnerable, too mortal. So you teach. And in teaching, you speak. You gesture. You develop a shared vocabulary for making. Words or sounds that mean pull tight, loop again, reverse direction. Sewing shapes language. Language shapes thought. And thought shapes society. You notice who is best with the needle. Sometimes it's the elder with shaky hands but sharp eyes. Sometimes it's a child. Sometimes it's a woman whose hands stitch while her voice sings. They become the seam keepers, the menders, the ones you turn to when something precious falls apart. And their status rises. They are not warriors, not hunters, but they hold a different kind of power. Without them, the boots split, the slings fail, the tents collapse. They keep the world stitched, literally and metaphorically. They become central. Thread changes status. Thread changes structure. And then, one night, as a storm batters your shelter, you look at the stitched seams above your head. Dry, tight, secure, and realize you've built more than a garment. You've built control. Where once the world poured into you, cold, wind, chaos, you now keep it out. Your skin is no longer your only boundary. You wear the mind of your people on your body. And when the storm passes and the sun returns, you step outside, warm, dry, alive, and ask, if we can hold the cold out with thread, can we hold memory in with stone? The cave breathes around you, not with warmth, not with the gentleness of firelight or the hush of woven hides, but with weight, with silence, with stone. The air is thick, almost sacred, and for the first time you feel not just protected, but watched. The walls seem to lean in, not to threaten, but to listen. And you have something to say. You've carved tools. You've sewn thread. You've hunted beasts and survived winters that shattered lesser creatures. But now, a different hunger grows. Not in your belly, but behind your eyes. A hunger to remember, to understand, to leave something behind. And here, in this cave, with its cool belly of darkness and quiet, you begin. Your fingers dip into ochre, red like blood, like sunset, like the inside of a mammoth. You grind it with fat, spit, charcoal. It becomes paint. You smear it on the wall. A handprint first, yours. A declaration. I was here. Then come the shapes. An arc of horns. A slash of hooves. A bison mid-leap. A woolly rhino crashing forward. You do not draw them still. You draw them moving. Alive. Charged with memory. You mix pigment with motion. Lines that pulse and twist and seem to breathe when firelight dances across them. And for a moment, you see it. The wall is not stone. It is memory. Your memory. Your people's. You are no longer just reacting to the world. You are recording it. The cave becomes your first library. Not of books, but of blood and bone and breath. The hunts are recorded here. The migrations, the spirits, the warnings, the dreams. You paint what you fear, what you admire, what you don't yet understand. A line of dots that traces the moon. A herd in formation. A spiral that no one can explain, but everyone respects. You are not merely decorating, you are encoding. Each symbol, each smear, each mark is layered with meaning. Perhaps it's a reminder, hunt here, or a tribute. This was her kill. Or a spell. Let the prey come. Whatever it is, it speaks when you are not present. It endures. Stone becomes your second skin, your external brain. Others begin to add to it. A younger hand draws over yours, adding antlers. An elder corrects a shape. A child dips their fingers just to feel the cold red on skin. The wall becomes a conversation across time. You begin to recognize style. This figure was drawn by the wide-shouldered man, that one by the woman who sings. Even the dead speak through pigment. You have made your thoughts portable across generations. Outside, the world is always changing. Herds shifting, ice melting, storms flattening tents. But in here, the cave holds steady. It holds the pattern. You light a fire, and the shadows of the animals begin to move. You watch as a bison seems to gallop. A mammoth bucks. A man with spear dances across the rock. In the flickering light, story and spectacle merge. The cave becomes your first theater. You sit with others and tell the tale of the hunt, of the beast that got away, of the woman who saved the group, of the one who never came back. You chant, you gesture, you point to the wall. Your stories are not just spoken, they are anchored, visual, retold again and again with consistency and flair. This is the beginning of shared culture, and it begins to shape who you are. The cave teaches patience. The paint takes time. The charcoal must be burned just right. The pigments ground, the surfaces smoothed. You mix materials like alchemists, earth and bone and blood and ash. You become an artist, yes, but also a chemist, a teacher, a curator. You begin to decorate objects too, not just walls. A carved bone with hatch marks, a pebble etched with zigzags, a mammoth tusk painted with dots and loops. Each one tells something. Where you've been, who you are, what matters. Symbols emerge. Not quite writing, not yet. But close. A zigzag for water. A crescent for the moon. A dot inside a circle for the sun. They begin to repeat. Travel from camp to camp. Passed from hand to hand, meaning starts to detach from the object and exist on its own. Abstraction is born. This changes how you think. You no longer need to see the mammoth to remember it. You can conjure it in your mind. You can plan, predict, anticipate. You can pass on knowledge without waiting for it to happen again. You can teach what you've never personally done. The cave gives you memory beyond flesh. It becomes your temple, your archive, your mirror. And still, it offers more. On cold nights, when the wind screams and the snow blinds, you gather in its shelter, not just for warmth, but for identity. You are no longer just a band of hungry bodies. You are a people with history. You have ancestors now. You speak of before. You begin to dream of after. And somewhere deep in that darkness, your sense of time itself stretches. You imagine not just tomorrow, but forever. But as you paint the final lines, your torch sputtering, you realize no memory survives alone, and no shelter, however sacred, can hold back what's coming. The next great migration, the long walk across ice and stone, to build not just memory, but home. The camp begins as a circle, just a rough ring of stones and mammoth bones on a patch of wind-swept earth. Tents made from hides and sinew pegged into the frozen ground. Fires in the center, people huddled around them, backs to the wind, eyes scanning the dark. It is not permanent. Nothing is, not yet. But it is intentional. And that changes everything. Before you moved with the herds, quick stops, temporary shelters, always chasing the next meal. But now, with fire, with clothing, with memory preserved in pigment and thread, you begin to wonder, what if we stayed? Not forever, not through every season, but long enough to matter. The camp becomes more than a pause. It becomes a plan. You return to the same place again and again. A bend in the river, a bluff sheltered from wind, a valley rich in reindeer and wood. You know it. You trust it. You begin to shape it. First come the bones, mammoth tusks driven into the ground to form frames. ribs for arches, jaws for supports. Then come the hides, stitched with care, layered thick, overlapping like scales. Smoke holes cut, entrances angled against the wind. And then, the unexpected. Furniture. Stones flattened for seats. Platforms raised from the ground to keep furs dry. Shelves carved from driftwood, piled with tools. Suddenly, you're not just surviving in space. You're arranging it. You build storage pits lined with hide, racks to dry meat. You start thinking in terms of layout. The warmest corner of the shelter becomes the sleeping place. The outer edges are for tools, for work. There's a rhythm to it all, a logic, a kind of choreography of daily life. And this marks a leap. You are beginning to design. The space around you is no longer random. It is shaped. By needs, yes, but also by thought. You make boundaries between sleeping and butchering, between waste and food, between sacred and ordinary. You begin to divide your world, not just physically but conceptually. And then come roles. Certain people wake before others, to tend the fire, to prepare the day. Some work hides, some shape blades, some care for the children. Some tell stories, not because anyone told them to, but because it works. It flows. And in this flow, society is born. You still hunt, still move when the herds shift, still sleep with one eye open. But when you come back to your camp, it's like returning to yourself. The place remembers you. The stones are still there, the marks on the trees, the old bones, bleached and sacred, where a grandmother died and was honored. It is yours. Ownership is a strange idea. New, dangerous even. But it seeps into your thoughts. These hides were stretched by your hands. This pit was dug by your brother. This fire pit has burned for years through hundreds of nights. When others come too close, you feel it in your bones. This is where we belong. And so you begin to mark it. You stack stones in certain ways, scratch symbols into bark, leave painted shells near paths. You create a landscape of signs, of signals, messages to those who return, and to those who should stay away. The camp becomes a territory, and with territory comes memory. Children are born here. People die here. Fires burn for seasons. Every corner holds a story. That tree is where the hunter saw the bear. That path leads to the shale pit. That circle of stones, no one moves them. Ever. No one remembers why. But everyone obeys. Your world thickens with meaning, and meaning brings ritual. You begin to gather at specific times, after hunts, during full moons, when someone is born, when someone dies. You chant, you dance, you burn herbs. You don't know what it does, but it feels like it matters. The camp is not just a shelter. It's a place where the invisible becomes visible, where moments become memory. And then, one evening, after a hunt, as you return carrying meat and story, you see something new. A new shelter already built. Someone stayed behind. Someone planned, worked, created without being told. It is not a copy of the others. It has a different angle, a different layout, more space. A new kind of bone lattice. You are stunned. They improved it. The camp has begun to evolve. And this spreads. New types of lashings, better angles for drainage, smoke vents that actually work, ice walls to block wind, even floor mats woven from reeds. It's as if the very idea of shelter has become a canvas for competition, collaboration, and pride. You're not just surviving anymore, you're building. You begin to assign spaces. That area is for flint knapping, that one for drying hides. That patch of earth is where the children play, where their feet have worn the snow to mud. And suddenly, without words, without blueprints, you have made a village. Primitive, yes. Temporary, maybe, but a prototype of something bigger. And in the center, always, the fire, still crackling, still guarded, still sacred. But now it reflects more than survival. It reflects order, intention, a world slowly, tentatively bending to your will. And one night, as you stare at the sleeping shapes around you, each curled in warmth, the shelters standing firm against the wind, the meat drying safely beneath its rack, the bone needles resting beside half-finished hides, you feel something rise in your chest. Pride. Not the kind that boasts, the kind that builds. But even this small world has limits. The wind still howls, the animals still flee, and to protect what you've made, you must go further. Not just with hands and tools, but with words. Because now, survival will depend on something new. Language. You open your mouth and change the world. It doesn't happen all at once. There is no great first word, no sudden poetry, just a grunt, a cry, a gesture matched with a sound. But in that moment, something invisible takes shape between you and another. An idea passes, and it lands. Understood. And that changes everything. You have always communicated. A look, a nudge, a whistle to signal danger. But now you begin to layer meaning, to give shape to the things you feel and cannot point to. The words start small, maybe sounds for fire, water, danger, mammoth. But they grow, because your world is growing, with tools, with camps, with stories etched in cave walls. You now need to speak of things not here. What happened yesterday, or 3 valleys away, or in the dream you had last night. You need to speak of intention, not just reaction. So you do something no other creature can do. You name your thoughts. You call out across the camp, not just to warn, but to ask. You name objects, actions, people. A flake of flint is not just a tool, it becomes sharp. A bison isn't just meat, it's fast, angry, mother. The world unfolds into layers of description. And then, the words begin to stack. This bison is angry. The river is frozen. The child is cold. You begin to thread thoughts together. One idea joins with another, and meaning becomes a rope, not a stone. And this rope can stretch across time. You can now tell someone what will happen, what should be done, what might go wrong. The future enters your mouth, and with it, responsibility. Because now, your group listens not just for noise, but for truth. A false alarm can lead to chaos. A misunderstood signal can lead to death. So the sounds must become stable, consistent, shared. You begin to shape a system. Your tribe becomes a chorus. The children learn the sounds early. They babble around the fire, trying them out. Elders correct them, softly, firmly. Over time, the sounds settle. Patterns emerge. A common rhythm. A grammar. Not written, but woven into memory. Language becomes infrastructure. It connects the shelter to the hunt, the story to the fire, the parent to the child. Now, when danger approaches, you don't just scream, you describe. Lion near river. You add scale, distance, urgency. Your warnings become maps. But language is not just survival, it is creation. You use it to name the stars, even if you don't know what they are. You invent words for feelings, sorrow, hunger, laughter, fear. Words that don't point to things, but to interiors. You are building a vocabulary for the soul, and in doing so, you begin to build culture. You tell stories more richly now. The mammoth fell here becomes, the mammoth fell after we circled it, after the spear of Little Tooth pierced its leg. The story gets longer, more detailed, more teachable. You pass it on. Language becomes the first inheritance not made of bone or blood. And with it, children learn not just what to do, but why. They begin to ask questions of their own. Why does the moon change shape? What lives beyond the glacier? Why do the dead not return? Language gives voice to curiosity. It also gives voice to power. Some speak better than others, clearer, with more confidence, more memory, more persuasion. Their words begin to influence what the group does. Who hunts? Who stays? Who decides when to move? Not because they command, but because they explain. Speech becomes influence, and influence slowly becomes leadership. The speakers are not always the strongest. Sometimes they are the ones who sit by the fire while others work, listening, watching. They carry the group's history in their heads. They are the first orators, and they are essential. Because now, when you face a problem, you no longer just react. You discuss. 3 families want the same stretch of river. 2 hunters spotted the same wounded bison. 1 child is sick, and no one knows why. These are not problems that fists or spears can solve alone. They require talking, listening, deciding, and language makes that possible. But it also brings danger. A lie is now possible. So is manipulation. A soft voice can guide the group wrong. Words can cut deeper than bone. One misspoken phrase, "the cave is safe," can lead a dozen into death. So you begin to choose your speakers carefully. Truth becomes a virtue. Memory becomes currency. Elders are now revered not just for having survived, but for remembering accurately. The ones who can recall every hunt, every trail, every storm. They are living books. You sit beside them at night and ask, "What did the great ice do?" And they answer, slow and steady, their voices thick with years. And when they die, their words are mourned more than their bodies. But not lost, because now, with language, their stories outlive them. Their teachings echo in the mouths of those they raised. And so they remain, not in flesh, but in voice. This is the beginning of tradition. It will carry you across ice and continent. It will bind your people long after your bones have turned to dust. Because every camp, every shelter, every painted cave and sharpened blade is nothing without someone to say, "This is what we know. This is who we are. This is how we live." But even as your language spreads, your prey changes. The reindeer grow restless, the bison migrate early, the mammoths vanish from the valley. And so you must evolve again, not through thought alone, but through stealth. Because to hunt what you can't outrun, you must become invisible. The herds have grown wary. You've killed too many. Your scent is known. The reindeer veer off paths they once followed. The bison stampede sooner. The mammoths trumpet before your spears lift. The prey that once stumbled into your traps now gives you wide berth. And so, you adapt. Not by chasing harder, but by becoming quieter. You watch the animals more carefully now, tracking not just where they go, but how they think. You learn their habits, their rhythms. When the reindeer graze, when the wind shifts, when the bull turns his back, you begin to move differently, slower, lower, in step with the heartbeat of the land. You become a shadow. Your furs are no longer just warmth. They're camouflage, dyed with earth, moss, and ash to blend into the tundra. You coat your skin with mud to mask your scent. You crawl through snowbanks, holding your breath as prey passes within arm's reach. You stop being the storm. You become the silence before it. Stealth becomes your sharpest weapon. The spear tip kills, but stealth places it. One wrong sound, one cracked twig, and a week's effort vanishes. So you move like a whisper, your breath measured, your steps deliberate. Even your tools grow quieter. Bowstrings replaced with softer sinew, arrows wrapped in feather and fat. Your group learns the unspoken language of the hunt, a flick of fingers to signal left, a raised chin to mean wait, a glance to mean now. Words are left behind. The hunt becomes a dance of silence, an orchestra of glances and breath. And still, you fail. Sometimes the prey escapes. Sometimes the wind shifts and carries your scent. Sometimes the animal looks straight at you, not with fear, but with the deep, uncanny awareness that it knows. And it flees, and you starve. So you push further. You begin to shape the hunt, not just follow, not just ambush, but engineer it. You build drives, long lines of stones and brush arranged to funnel herds toward traps. You guide them unknowingly, 100 steps at a time, until it's too late. The kill zone is chosen by you. You force the land to conspire. And when that isn't enough, you trick them. You imitate animal calls, high whistling bleats of a calf to lure a worried mother. You wear skins not just for warmth, but to become the animal. You crouch in reindeer hide, moving like one of the herd, until the moment you strike. Deception becomes survival. You begin to understand your prey more intimately than your enemies. You study how they breathe, how they bleed, where their bones break, how they fight when cornered. You learn empathy, not out of kindness but necessity. To hunt well is to think like your target, and this changes you. You develop patience beyond what any beast knows. You wait in stillness for hours. You lie belly flat in the snow, heartbeat slowed, eyes unblinking. You let hunger sharpen you, not drive you. You become disciplined, strategic. You become predators of the mind. And your tools follow suit. The atlatl gives way to the bow, a quiet weapon, curved from bone or yew, strung with twisted gut. You practice for days, weeks, years. You learn to read the arc of air, to predict where the beast will be before it moves. Arrows are shaped with barbs, tipped with stone or fire-hardened wood, designed to tear and bleed. The bow does not roar, it whispers death. With this new power, the distance between you and your prey grows. You no longer need to charge. You don't need strength. You need accuracy, stillness, focus. The old ways of brute force fade. In their place, precision. And then comes the trap line. You string snares along trails, dig pit traps disguised with branches, line paths with bone fragments that slice hooves. You map the movements of animals over weeks, drawing lines in the snow with a stick, charting loops and crossings. You are no longer guessing. You are planning. You use fire to herd, smoke to blind, echoes to confuse. You've turned the entire landscape into a weapon. And still, there is respect. The animal dies, and you kneel. A hand to its flank. A quiet word. Gratitude, perhaps. Or apology. Because you understand, this world is not yours alone. You are part of it, and though you shape it, you do not own it. But your place in it? That is earned. You return to camp with meat, with hide, with stories. The children gather to hear how you became invisible, how the animal fell, how the arrow flew. You teach them stealth, not just as technique, but as virtue. The stillness before the strike, the silence that keeps you alive. And now, as you walk through the snow, you leave fewer tracks. You breathe shallower. Even the wolves take longer to notice you. Because you are no longer just human. You are myth. And yet, myths must grow. They must spread. And survival, too, cannot stay local. Because soon you'll need more than meat. You'll need materials, ideas, allies. You'll need to walk further, think wider. And for that, you must learn the ancient art of trade. The world begins to stretch, not because the glaciers melt. Not yet. Not because your legs have grown longer or your hunger has grown sharper, but because you are no longer content with what lies within your reach. You've hunted the herds near your camp, gathered the flint from the familiar cliffs, burned the wood that once seemed endless. And now, one question stirs beneath your ribs. What lies beyond? At first, it's just the scouts, the restless ones. They disappear into the morning mist and return days later with stories of other valleys, other camps, other fires, of people who speak strange words, who wear their furs differently, who eat things you don't. And yet, they are like you. They carry bone blades. They wear hide. They sing around flames. They bury their dead with care. And they have things you don't. Seashells in the mountains. Obsidian from far beyond your hunting grounds. Dried roots you've never tasted. Ochre in colors your caves have never known. A bone flute that sings like wind in pine. These things tell a story you can't ignore. You are not alone, and so you go. Not in war, not with conquest, but with caution. With bundles of goods slung over shoulders, fire wrapped in moss, furs strapped tight against wind. You walk the old animal paths, tracing rivers and ridgelines, crossing valleys white with snow and silence. And then, one day, you meet them. Not the scouts, not the ghosts of your own tribe. Strangers. You tense. You reach for your blade. but they do not run. They do not bare teeth. One of them, an elder, eyes wary, steps forward, reaches into a pouch, holds something out. It's a blade, like yours, but better. They want to trade, so you offer what you have: a strip of sinew, a carved bone hook, a dried slab of meat. There's a moment of stillness, judgment. Then they nod. The exchange is made. No words. Not really, just intention. And just like that, everything changes. Because this isn't just about goods. It's about connection. Trade becomes the thread that binds distant camps. A sinew stretched across the continent. Obsidian from one valley shows up in another, weeks away. A carved antler passes from hand to hand, each owner adding their own etching. Objects become ambassadors, carrying style, technology, story. The world becomes a network. At first you trade what is rare. Salt, flint, dried fish, bear fat, shells from the coast. But then something else enters the market. Ideas. You return from one journey with a better spearhead, another with a way to smoke meat that lasts twice as long. You learn a new stitch, a better trap, a song that calms a baby at night. Knowledge flows like water now, carried not by elders alone, but by exchange. And it spreads fast. The atlatl appears in places you've never seen. Cave marks from far tribes echo symbols from your own. Threads once unknown are now common. What one group discovers, another adapts. Innovation no longer belongs to individuals. It belongs to the network. And the network is vast. You begin to see paths not as obstacles, but as routes. Valleys become way stations. Caves become markers. Landmarks take on new meaning, not just for navigation, but for orientation. This is where the Red Ochre people pass. Beyond that hill is the Flint place. That lake, the shell traders live there. You start to map not just space, but society. And with that map comes something profound. Trust. Trade cannot survive on fear. If every meeting ends in blood, no goods change hands. So you begin to build rituals around exchange. Signs of peace, open hands, specific gestures, offerings placed on the ground and stepped away from. You learn diplomacy, and you pass it on. Children are taught not just to track or hunt, but to negotiate, to observe, to understand the body language of strangers. To offer first, ask second. You are building not just a culture, but a coalition. And within that coalition, language begins to bend. You borrow words, share names, you develop pidgins, blended tongues that let you speak across tribes. At first just for trade, but then for stories, for jokes, for song. You learn that understanding is itself a form of wealth. But trade does more than enrich. It shapes ambition. Now you don't just make tools for yourself. You make them for others. You design spears not only to use, but to show off. More beautiful, more decorated, more desirable. You are inventing prestige, status, the seed of commerce, and this creates specialists. Some among you grow better at certain tasks, not just passable, but exceptional. The flint napper who makes blades no one else can. The woman who weaves fibers into cords so fine they seem like hair. The elder who knows how to smoke herbs that preserve meat for moons. They no longer hunt. Others bring them food. because their work feeds the network. You are inventing division of labor. You are no longer a simple band, you are a society. And still, the network grows. You hear of groups you've never met, of lands beyond the glacier's edge, of things as strange as fire from the sky and animals with feathers like snow. You want to see them. You want to know. Because with trade comes curiosity. And with curiosity, migration. The trade paths become migration trails. What begins as exchange becomes movement, not just of goods, but of people. Families follow the network, settle near trading hubs. Camps grow, tribes intermarry, cultures blend. And all of this, every step, every spoken word, every trade of shell for sinew, begins to stitch your species together. You are no longer alone, but not every meeting is peaceful. Soon, not every stranger wants to trade. Some want to take, and in those moments when the talking fails and the hands don't open, another invention rises. War. The first arrow flies in silence, not toward prey, not toward a beast, but toward you. It buries itself in the snow near your feet, close enough to hear the hiss, to smell the stone, to see the flint glint under sun. You freeze. Across the riverbank, a figure emerges, not a stranger with goods. No offering hands, just a hardened face. Spear in hand, another behind him, and another. You know what this is. The network of trade, once so fluid and generous, has limits. Resources dwindle. Herds vanish. Too many families follow the same rivers. Too many camps cluster near the same hunting trails. Shells are not enough. Obsidian is not enough. Some want what you have, and they don't want to ask. And so you learn to defend, not just with tools, but with strategy. At first, it's reaction. Fortify the camp, double the scouts, sharpen the spears, sleep lighter. But then you begin to organize. You watch how they move, those rival groups. You study the patterns of their raids, their entrances, their exits. You prepare ambushes. Set traps not for mammoths, but for men. You fight, and it is nothing like the hunt. Prey runs. This enemy thinks. Dodges. Circles back. Uses fire as a weapon. You see shelters burning, hear the screams of a child taken. The fight is not just about food. It is about fear, territory, dominance. And it cuts deep. This is the first time you bleed not from claw or fang, but from kin, from someone like you, with the same hands, the same eyes, and it stays with you. But from this, new ways of thinking emerge. You form alliances, not just families, clans. You recognize that 5 hunters are not enough, but 5 families, linked by blood, by vow, by shared flame, might be. So you gather. You sit around the fire, and you speak, not of the next meal, but of the next move. Who will stand watch? Who will guard the river crossing? Where the elders will hide if the camp is breached. You are making the first defense plans. And from this planning, new roles are born. The scout, the sentry, the war leader. He or she is not always the strongest, but the one whose voice cuts through panic. The one others follow without needing to be asked. They do not command for glory. They orchestrate for survival. Conflict clarifies. You begin to reinforce your shelters, not just for weather, but for siege. You dig shallow ditches, stack walls of stone, create warning systems, bone chimes strung across paths. The camp becomes not just home, but stronghold. And yet you do not give up trade. You learn to hold two truths, that strangers may bring wealth or war. That caution is survival, but connection is still necessary. You create protocols, meeting grounds at a distance, intermediaries who speak both tongues, token exchanges to prove peace. You invent diplomacy. But still, the raids come. So you begin to train. You do not call it that. You do not yet know what an army is. But you spar. You practice. You throw spears not at beasts, but at targets. You drill formations. 2 in front, 3 to flank, 1 to strike. You teach the youth not just to hunt, but to fight men. And you begin to remember your enemies, their faces, their scars, the shape of their weapons. You carve warning symbols into trees near their lands. Paint red handprints near trails you will not cross again. You build a map in your mind. Safe zones, no man's lands, contested grounds. You are building borders. And with borders comes identity. You are no longer just us. You are us versus them. The Fire Valley people, the shell wearers, the bone-painted ones. You wear symbols of your clan, a braided cord, a specific ochre streak. You mark your children with dyes only your kin use. Culture, once fluid, now becomes flag. You mourn your dead, not just with grief, but with ritual. You bury the warriors with their weapons. You paint their bones. You tell their stories louder, longer. They become heroes, not just individuals, but symbols. Memory becomes armor. And as the decades pass, you see something strange. Your weapons improve, not just for hunting, but for war. You make spears with wider heads, bows with stronger pull. You invent small shields, lashed hides over bone frames. You begin to see tactics, feints, retreats, decoys. You are no longer reacting. You are strategizing. And yet, not all war is blood and fire. You learn that the threat of war can be just as powerful. You posture, parade, march your hunters past a rival camp, faces painted, weapons bared. But you do not strike. You warn. And sometimes that is enough. Fear becomes currency. But even as war becomes part of your life, something unexpected happens. Order emerges. Clans that fought begin to negotiate. Shared hunting grounds, marriage ties, seasonal meetings. What began as violence slowly becomes structure. You establish rules, even if they're unwritten. Rules for trade, for revenge, for justice. The roots of law. And now, as the fire crackles low and the children sleep, you sit with the others, elders, hunters, menders, and speak not of bloodshed, but of balance, of how to keep peace, how to remember war without letting it consume you. You have become not just a survivor, not just a hunter, not just a builder. You are now a governor of people. And as you sleep that night, your weapons beside you, your clan close, you wonder, if war could shape us this much, what did we forget before we had words to write it down? Winter arrives with teeth. Not the steady cold of seasons past, but a deep, snarling freeze that grinds its way through the bones of the land. Snow doesn't fall, it suffocates. Winds don't howl, they scream. The sun, once low and distant, vanishes altogether. Days blur into a long, dim twilight. The air tastes like stone. The world becomes still. And then the dying begins, not from war, not from hunger alone, but from cold. This winter is different, colder, longer. The animals vanish. Rivers freeze from shore to shore. The wind enters places it shouldn't. Beneath hides, under the stones of your shelter, into your lungs. Firewood burns faster. Fat stores shrink. Children cry all through the night. Elders stop speaking. You do not leave camp. There is nowhere to go. Even the wolves have gone silent. The old ways, hunting, trading, raiding, fail in the face of this monstrous season. Your plans crack like ice underfoot. And for the first time in generations, you realize you might not survive this one. But you do not give up. You adapt. It begins with a question. What do we still have? And the answer is clear. Each other. So you pull closer, huddle tighter. You combine shelters, tear down the individual tents, and build a single long one. A great shared hall of hides and bones, the fire burning in its center. It's smoky, cramped. The air is thick with breath, ash, and sweat. But it is alive. You strip down the camp for heat, every last dry stick. You burn tools, sled frames, even parts of the shelter itself. You ration the fat stores with ruthless discipline. 1 bite for the child, half for the elder, a sliver for the mother who has stopped making milk. No one eats alone, no one eats in silence. You survive not by strength, but by unity. The old divisions fall away. The hunter and the storyteller share the same blanket. The warrior braids the child's hair. The old woman who cannot walk is carried from fire to fire so she can whisper what she remembers. Memory becomes your lifeline. Because you need more than calories now. You need hope. And hope lives in the voice of those who say, "We have lived through worse." You listen to stories with more hunger than you've ever felt for food. Stories of hunts gone wrong but saved, of children born in storms, of lovers who found each other after exile. The past becomes fuel, and innovation follows. You find ways to trap the last warmth. You seal every seam of the shelter with wet clay, frozen into armor. You sleep in shifts so someone is always stoking the coals. You build fire pits beneath sleeping platforms. You collect urine and freeze it outside to mark territory and keep predators at bay, wolves that now creep closer than ever. You think in problems. You solve them one by one. The food is running out? You grind old bones into powder, mix with fat and dried roots to make a paste. The babies won't stop crying. You chew bark for warmth, spit it into their mouths so their bodies will believe they've eaten. The fire is dying. You invent a new fuel, twisted ropes of dried grass and dung, rolled tight, packed under stones. You've become more than survivors. You've become engineers of desperation. And from this desperation, something else grows. Governance. Decisions must be made quickly. Rationed, trusted. Not everyone can lead. Not every opinion weighs the same. So the elders, the skilled, the proven, they form a circle. Not to rule, but to guide. To weigh what's left and what must be risked. You sit with them, and for the first time, you see power not as strength, but as wisdom. They are not warriors. They are calculators of breath. And every breath matters now. You begin to track it. Who ate? Who didn't? Who grew weaker? Who has the will to go on? You inventory life like you once inventoried tools. Because now, even kindness must be measured. Not out of cruelty, but out of care. And then, somehow, you begin to sing. Quietly. At first, just to soothe the children. Then to mark the end of a long day. Then just because silence feels like surrender. The songs are not joyful, but they are defiant. They say, "We are still here." And the songs spread. Your group, once bound by blood, is now bound by song. You hum to each other through sleep. You tap rhythms into the ground. The beat becomes breath. A way of counting time, of passing hours without despair. And one morning, just as the fire threatens to die for good, you hear it. Drip. Then again. Drip. The snow is melting. The ice begins to weep. Tiny rivulets appear along the camp's edges. The air smells different, less like smoke, more like possibility. And someone, no one remembers who, laughs. It's a strange sound, startling, and then another joins in, and another. Laughter returns before the sun does. You step outside for the first time in days, maybe weeks. Your legs tremble, but your heart does not. The sky has not changed. The wind still bites, but you are different. You have faced the worst winter the earth could give. And you did not break, not because of fire, not because of meat, but because of us. Now, as the snow thins and the animals return, you look at your people, the ones who made it, the ones who gave, the ones who led, the ones who waited. And you understand a truth older than language. Alone, you would have died. Together, you became something new. But this isn't the end. Now that you've learned to survive the deadliest winter, what comes next is not just about endurance. It's about movement. And the ancient trails, the ones you sang into snow, are calling again. The snow melts slowly, revealing bones. Bones of animals you once hunted. Bones of kin who did not survive. Bones of the past season, of the last generation, of the world that froze and tried to end you. You see them along trails, at the edge of the camp, under the thawing hides of forgotten shelters. And still, you move forward. Not because you want to, because you must. The great cold has passed, but it has left behind a changed land. The herds have shifted. The rivers have swollen with melt. Familiar paths have vanished under fallen trees and avalanche debris. What was known is now uncertain. And yet your people rise with the sun. They gather bundles, tie cords, shoulder packs. The camp is broken down not in silence, but in rhythm. Each movement part of a memory practiced many times before. You have done this. Your parents did this. Their ancestors before them. This is not the first journey. It is the longest. The ancient trails stretch out before you, not in maps, not in drawings, but in ritual, in story, in song. This is the Valley of the Red Cliffs. Turn where the river splits like antlers. Past the dead pine with the cracked trunk. There, we will find the flint again. You do not need maps. You have the old routes and the memory of those who walked them. And with every step, something remarkable happens. You begin to see others. They emerge at trading points, at water crossings, along ridgelines. Other bands, other clans, other travelers like you. Some familiar, some strangers, some hungry, some wary, but most greet you with cautious hope. The great winter forced everyone to move. And now the earth is threaded with migration lines. You call them by different names: sacred paths, sky trails, river roads, but they all serve the same purpose. They connect, not just people, but cultures. They are arteries of survival, and upon them something new emerges. Trade without words. A pile of stones carefully stacked. A woven basket left under a fir tree. A sealed pouch tied with a knot you recognize. These are the silent exchanges. Trust placed in place. Leave a tool, take one. Add a smoked fish. Take a spearhead. A language of action, of balance. The roots begin to hum with meaning. You follow them not only for survival, but for knowledge. You meet a group who paints their faces with lime, another who binds feathers into their hair, another whose dogs pull sleds you've never seen. Each encounter changes you. Each step on the trail adds to your toolkit of ideas, and your own stories begin to move outward. You hear a song you taught, sung back to you in a different dialect. You see one of your bone hooks used in a way you never imagined. A child in another band wears a carving from your hand, traded seasons ago, now treasured. Ideas now travel faster than people. The trail becomes not just a passage, but a bridge. Along these routes, you begin to leave markers, not just for navigation, but for meaning. Symbols carved into trees, pebbles arranged in spirals, bundles of feathers tied in trees as signs of welcome or warning. These become your language of the land, and the land speaks back. You learn to read it more intimately than ever. The way moss grows tells you where north lies. The nesting spots of birds mark the coming of summer. A certain fungus on pine means you're near water. The earth becomes your compass. Your map is beneath your feet and above your head, in stars, in cloud shapes, in the scent of wind. But migration also means risk. The further you go, the more you step into the unknown. Not every band is friendly. Not every river is fordable. You lose people to floods, to falls, to illness, to silence. And still, you continue. Because migration is not just escape, it is ambition. You move to find better land, but also to find better life. You do not want to merely endure another winter, you want to build something that lasts. You begin to scout places not just to stop, but to stay. Longer, deeper, season after season. The idea of settlement takes root. You mark these places with intention. A stone circle, a carved post, a bone talisman buried beneath the soil. These are claims, not in the way of conquest, but in the way of belonging. We were here. We may return. This is part of us. The sacred roots begin to divide. Some paths remain migratory, eternal trails for trade and pilgrimage. Others begin to knot into hubs, valleys where people gather in numbers too large to move, where goods pile up, where fires burn for weeks, where stories are told not just at night, but performed. You have created seasonal villages, temporary, yes, but rich, complex, alive. Here you share innovations, new tool designs, new songs, new medicines. You perform rituals that require dozens of voices, dozens of drums. You tell stories that only make sense when spoken to a crowd. And then you move again. Because the land must rest. Because you are not yet farmers, not yet still. But you leave traces behind. A stone altar, a carved post, a memory. And when you return seasons later, someone has added to it. You are building a civilization without cities, a culture without walls, a future without knowing you're doing it. But the roots are more than paths. They are threads. And one day you realize, the people you meet, the ones who sing your songs, who trade your tools, who know you're dead by name, they are not strangers. They are kin, not by blood, but by story, by shared fire, shared path, shared winter. And you begin to dream of something greater than survival, of a world where movement is not a reaction to crisis, but a deliberate act of connection. But even as you walk these sacred routes, something stirs at their edges. The ice is beginning to pull back, and where it retreats, it leaves behind a new kind of land, open, green, dangerous. And it asks a new question. Now that the world is changing, can you change with it? The glaciers sigh and begin to vanish. It doesn't happen all at once. The great walls of ice don't crumble like cliffs. They retreat, slowly, reluctantly, as if they, too, understand they are losing their grip on the world. The cold still bites, but not with the same merciless edge. The rivers swell with meltwater. Valleys once buried reappear. You watch the ice pull back like the tide, and behind it a new world emerges. Open land, green shoots, wet soil, strange birds, forests creeping forward. Animals not seen in generations return, or arrive for the first time. The reindeer remain, but now they share the land with elk, rocks, wild pigs. The mammoth herds thin, the woolly rhinos vanish. Even the saber-tooths go quiet. The rhythm of the world is shifting, and so must you. The cold once shaped your every choice. It taught you to conserve, to cluster, to protect the fire as if it were breath. But now, the fire is not always necessary. The wind is not always fatal. The land opens, and with it, choices. But freedom is a different kind of danger. The prey move more freely now, dispersing, no longer forced along tight corridors of ice and stone. The old ambush points don't work. The migration trails are less predictable. Some don't return at all. You track a herd across a wide, unfrozen valley, and realize too late there is no shelter, no reliable water, no firewood for days. You return with nothing. The ice was brutal, but it was predictable. Now the world is uncertain. And so once again, you adapt. Your camps change. Where once you built shelters tight and low against wind, you now build wider, taller. You experiment with open structures, poles lashed in new ways. You use bark now, not just hide. You begin to explore materials that once felt unfamiliar. You settle longer in places, seasons, not just weeks. You stay long enough to notice things, how certain plants return in patterns, how animals graze near water only at dawn, how roots grow deeper where the soil is darker. You begin to see cycles not just in the stars, but in the ground. You are not farming, not yet, but you are observing the land as if you might. You plant seeds, not with certainty, but with curiosity. You scatter grains from a valley you passed last year. You return and find green shoots waiting. You mark the spot, begin to protect it, feed it. You water with carved bowls, you chase away animals, you learn. Slowly, painfully, what grows best where. You are not just hunter, you are becoming gardener. And with this change, time stretches. The hunt is still vital, still sacred, but now you look beyond the next kill. You ask what happens next spring. You wonder what the children will harvest. You plan for the future in ways your Ice Age self never could. And planning brings storage. You dig pits not just to bury bones, but to preserve grain. You weave baskets with tighter coils, seal them with pine sap. You build racks above the ground to keep meat from rot, from rats. You dry, smoke, salt, ferment. You no longer eat just what's fresh. You eat what lasts. And that means your people last longer too. Elders grow even older. Children survive more winters. Entire bands rise not from conquest but from stability. The same faces year after year. You begin to know generations, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Memory deepens. Stories once told of before the glacier now become history. The world of ice becomes mythic. You speak of it with awe and suspicion. When the ice ruled, we were different. The fire was smaller then, but brighter. You do not forget the old world, but you are not returning to it, because now the world is abundant, and that brings complexity. More food means more people. More people means more voices, more needs, more conflict. You begin to divide labor more finely. Not just hunter and seamstress, but bone carver, basket weaver, flint master, herb keeper. You create specialists, and specialists need systems. You build places for gathering, open clearings, central fire rings, large shelters with woven walls. Meetings are no longer just necessity. They are ritual. Decisions are made here. Disputes are settled. Resources divided. News exchanged. You are building not just society, but governance. And with abundance comes inequality. Some have more grain. Some have stronger shelters. Some have tools others want. And for the first time, status begins to calcify. Not just earned, but inherited. A child born to the flint master learns the skill early. A grandchild of the healer is taught secret herbs. Knowledge, once shared freely, begins to be guarded. And yet, knowledge still spreads. You see it in the carving styles, the patterns on baskets, the paint on bodies. You recognize echoes of far-off bands, people you've never met, whose stories you've only heard sung across trade routes. Ideas ripple outward. They travel faster than bodies, across rivers, through intermarriage, through gifts, through war, through song. And so your identity becomes layered. You are not just of your valley. You are of the trail, of the exchange, of the shared myths. But the old threats haven't vanished. Storms still come, herds still vanish, children still fall sick, and with the glaciers gone, new dangers emerge. Floods, diseases, strangers in larger numbers than ever before. Change does not stop when the ice retreats. It accelerates. And now you stand on the edge of something you cannot yet name. You have seen fire, stone, thread, shelter, trade, war, speech, story, map, path, plant, peace. You have survived the age of ice to... Yet something tells you, this is not the end. This is the beginning, because now you do not just survive, you shape. And you begin to wonder if this land is new and we are new within it. What kind of people might we choose to become? The child places a hand in the ash, presses it to stone, and leaves a mark. It's not a picture, not a story, not yet. It's a declaration. I am here. And so are you. Because now, in this new world of thawed earth and long seasons, you are not just surviving moment to moment. You are teaching. Not out of desperation, but out of intention. You are shaping minds, not merely feeding mouths. And it begins with children. They no longer wander the edges of camp, mimicking adults in silence. They are drawn in, taught, directly, deliberately. You show them how to notch a stone, where to strike a flint core, how to tell a good hide from a bad one. They learn by watching, by doing, by failing. And they learn fast. Their bodies are small, their fingers clumsy, but their minds are hungry, open, electric. They absorb not just information, but worldview. Your habits become theirs, your stories, their truths, your dreams, their destiny. They are not simply born, they are forged. You start to create dedicated time for learning, not just task by task, but idea by idea. The older children gather with the elders, hear tales of how the land used to be, learn where the stars lead, how to read wind in grass. It is informal, but deliberate. The first schools are born, not with walls, but with ritual. And with this, a new kind of memory blooms. Institutional. What once had to be remembered by one person can now be taught to many. You no longer fear the loss of knowledge with the death of one elder, because their words have multiplied. Knowledge becomes scalable. You start to see generations not as burdens, but as investment. Children are not helpless extensions of their parents. They are the vessels that will carry your survival beyond your body. And so, you pour into them. You train not just hands, but imaginations. The child who asks, "Why does the sun move?" is not silenced, but guided. The one who draws patterns in dirt is given pigment. The one who sings during chores is brought to the next fire gathering, to add voice to ritual. Your society shifts. You no longer measure a person solely by what they can lift, carry, kill. You begin to value what they can teach. The storyteller, the sky watcher, the healer. the one who sees patterns in chaos. You begin to recognize different kinds of intelligence. The clever child who tricks the trap to spring early, the quiet one who senses when the rain is coming, the bold one who mimics animals until they forget he's not one of them. You stop forcing everyone into the same mold. Instead, you start shaping roles around gifts, and with that, the tribe becomes stronger than ever. Because now, it does not forget itself. It builds on itself. Each generation starts higher than the last, born not into blankness, but into culture, into songs already sung, paths already walked, lessons already learned. And those lessons are accumulating. Your people start carving tally marks into bones, not to record kills, but seasons. You begin to track time, not just by moons, but by cycles. When the birds return, when the river swells, when the elk calve, you start to predict. A calendar is forming, not a grid, not a chart, but a memory pattern, a ritual logic. When the frogs sing, the rains come next. 3 days after the moon disappears, the reindeer cross. You're moving from instinct to model, from reaction to foresight, and children learn it faster than anyone because they are born into it. What you had to survive to learn, they inherit as structure, as rhythm, as story. You realize that their starting point is higher than yours ever was, and this fills you with hope and fear, because what you teach becomes what they build on. And you begin to wonder, are we shaping them for the world we knew, or the one they will make? So you teach more than craft. You teach ethics. You begin to tell stories not just about how the hunt was done, but why the beast was honored, why meat is shared, why you do not take more than you need. These are not just traditions. They are lessons for power. Because power is coming. You can feel it. In the child's cleverness. In the new tool that cuts with half the effort. In the fire that burns longer with less fuel. You are approaching something beyond survival. You are approaching choice. And with that comes danger. So you speak of balance, of respect, of cooperation, of what happens when knowledge is hoarded, or strength is misused, or people are forgotten. The ice taught you pain, but now you teach discipline, restraint, empathy. Because the fire in the child's mind burns brighter than any flame you've carried, and you must guide it well. You look at them, running, laughing, mimicking you with small carved spears, and you do not see weakness. You see the future wearing your face. They will never know the world of glaciers and endless cold. They will never know what it meant to sleep in fear that fire might die. They will never know hunger in quite the same way. But they will know something else, what it means to choose who they become. And as you watch them light their own fires for the first time, you feel something deep inside shift. This is no longer the age of survival, it is the age of becoming. But before you go, before your bones are buried and your voice becomes story, there is one more task, to teach them how to remember. The dead are not gone. Not to you, not to your people, not in this world, where memory lives in everything that survives. You bury the old woman beneath the birch tree by the stream. You wrap her in her cloak of stitched fur, place her carved beads in her hands, and lay her knife beside her, a tool worn thin by decades of use. You cover her face with red ochre. You place stones over the grave. Not to hide her, to honor her, because you know, somehow deeply, that the dead still matter. And this is new. Once death was just absence, cold, loss, a return to the earth. But now, death has meaning. You don't just grieve. You remember. You preserve. You mark. You begin to bury your people with intention, with patterns. You return to their graves. You speak their names aloud, not just in mourning, but in story. Death becomes part of your language. You begin to mark time by it. The year after Crooked Tooth died. The spring when Redbird's son was taken by the river. The past is no longer a blur. It has names, anchors. Memory is no longer fleeting. It is rooted. And soon you want more than memory. You want presence, so you start to carve. Little figures of bone and stone. Faces, not perfect, not portraits, but approximations. The stooped back, the crooked nose, the way the old man leaned his staff. You place them at the edge of camp, or inside the shelter, or near the fire. You talk to them. You consult them. You're not praying, not yet. But you are recognizing the unseen. The idea that what was still is. That wisdom doesn't vanish with the body. That something remains, watching, guiding, maybe even judging. The dead become your first gods, not divine in power, but sacred in influence. They are not thunder or stars. They are echo. You carry them in beads, in songs, in scars, in the way you hold a tool or stir a pot. They are the unseen infrastructure of your days. And with this, ritual deepens. Burial becomes ceremony. The grave is no longer just a pit. It is a passage, a message. You arrange the body in the fetal position, returning them to the pose of birth. You line the grave with items that mattered. Tools, pigments, tokens of love. You believe, not because someone told you to, but because your bones tell you to, that this matters. And it does, because ritual brings closure. You grieve together. You chant. You tell the story. You share the burden. And then you move on, not forgetting, but integrating. The dead are not a rupture. They are a threshold. And this threshold becomes architecture. You begin to build markers over the graves, mounds of stone, circles of bone, totems carved from driftwood. They are more than memorials. They are maps of ancestry. You know where you come from, not just in the abstract, but in place. You build the first cemeteries, and they become sacred. You do not hunt there. You do not cut wood there. You speak softly near them. When the winds howl, you say it's the dead reminding you to listen. When the path is unclear, you sleep near their stones and dream of what they might advise. Memory becomes guide, and this guidance begins to organize your identity. You're not just the Stone River people. You're the people who buried Greyface by the twisted pine. You're the descendants of she who killed the bear. Your history becomes genealogy, and with it, lineage. You begin to keep track of who came before, of who was related to whom, who taught whom. You name children after the dead, not out of lack of imagination, but out of continuity. So their qualities live on. And one day, in the quiet after a death, you realize something extraordinary. The dead teach you how to live. Their stories are caution, wisdom, inspiration. You repeat them not just to remember, but to instruct. She never shared, and she died cold. He forgave, and the tribe survived. They built the shelter that stood the storm. Morality becomes story-shaped. You pass down values not through rules, but through narrative. The ones who helped, the ones who sacrificed, the ones who learned too late. The stories are shaped by memory, and memory is shaped by meaning. And soon you begin to ask the questions that have no answers. Where do they go? Are they watching? Will we be remembered? These are not survival questions. These are human questions, and they birth something new. Myth. You begin to tell stories not just of who died, but of where they went, of a world beneath the ground, where the stars are seeds, of a river that carries the soul, of a mountain where the ancestors wait. The line between memory and magic blurs. But it doesn't weaken. It strengthens you. Because myth is not delusion. It is structure. It gives shape to the unknowable. And through it, you learn to face life not with answers, but with courage. You teach the child to light a fire, but also to listen to the silence. To speak to the grandmother even when she's no longer near. To believe that life stretches further than breath. You begin to plan for your own death. What should be left behind? What stories should be told? What beads to wear? What bones to carve? You are no longer terrified of the end. You are preparing for it. Because now you know, the body may vanish, but the you that taught, that sang, that loved, that remembered, that remains. You will become part of the invisible structure. You will walk the world as story. And you hope? No, you know, that one day a child will place their hand in ash, press it to stone, and whisper your name. But first, you have one last thing to do. Step out of the world of shadows and ancestors, and build the future they made possible. You rise before dawn. The sky is still dark, a soft indigo hush over the new land. Mist clings to the ground like memory, and somewhere in the trees a bird calls, a kind you've never heard before. The air smells not of ice, nor smoke, nor blood. It smells like beginning. Because this world, newly uncovered by the retreating ice, is a canvas. And you are the builder. No longer are you bound by the grip of glaciers or the limits of migration. The herds return, yes, but they no longer decide your fate. The rivers run wild, but you no longer chase them. You've seen what life can be at its harshest, and now, for the first time, you ask, what if we shaped life instead of life shaping us? You look at the land with different eyes. That hill? Good drainage for grain? That bend in the river? Perfect for fish traps. That patch of sunlit soil? Maybe the seeds from the Red Valley will grow here. You're not wandering anymore. You're settling. You drive stakes into the ground, not just for tents, but for structure. You lash frames together not for temporary huts, but for durable homes. Walls of woven reeds, roofs of bark, fire pits dug deep. Hearths become permanent. The ground remembers your footsteps. And your people grow numerous. No longer bound by starvation cycles, the children survive. They thrive. You build with more than your hands now. You build with lineages, with dreams. The settlement thickens with song, with argument, with games. You see familiar faces in older bodies. You see your own gestures passed to younger hands. You no longer measure time in days or seasons, but in generations. And with settlement comes invention. You shape clay from riverbanks into bowls, at first by chance, then by design. You fire them in kilns of stone and ash. You etch them with symbols, patterns that mean ownership, blessing, memory. Pottery becomes story. Storage becomes art. You dig trenches for waste, pathways for walking. You organize space, cooking here, sleeping there, gathering there. You arrange life the way you once arranged stones in a hunting trap. Only now you are trapping time. You store food not just for seasons, but for years. You stockpile tools. You build backup shelters. You prepare for famine before famine arrives. You predict, plan, engineer. You've moved beyond reaction. You are now in an age of intention. And with that comes complexity. You need leaders, yes, but also mediators. You need stories, but also records. You start to count, not just bones or seasons, but people, goods, paths. You make marks in clay, score lines into wood, carve tallies into stone. Writing is still far away, but the instinct to mark meaning is now unstoppable. You no longer pass knowledge through whispers alone. You embed it into the landscape, into rituals, into stone circles and standing posts. You align buildings with stars, mark the solstice with fire. You do not just remember time, you build it into your bones, and still you look outward. Other settlements appear. You trade with them, you compete with them, you marry into them. Sometimes you fight, but more often you exchange. Not just goods, but ways of life. Your identity, once tied only to the cold, to the cave, to the mammoth, is now something richer. You are not ice people anymore. You are builders of the open world. The child who grows up here will not know what it meant to sleep 3 to a blanket for warmth, will not remember the scream of the wind over endless snow, will not fear waking to a fire gone cold. But they will remember the stories, because you told them. And that was the point all along. To carry forward what mattered, to forge something in the crucible of ice that could survive beyond it. Your tools, your shelters, your rituals, your alliances, your language, your myths, your teaching, your memory. You, because now, when you kneel in the soil to plant grain, when you sing your ancestors' names at the fire, when you teach a child to tie thread or chip flint or bury the dead, you feel it. The Ice Age is over. But its lessons live within you. Its cold sharpened your wit. Its silence shaped your voice. Its darkness taught you how to make light. It tested every part of what you are and what you might become. And now, you are still here. Not because you were the strongest, not because you were the smartest, but because you were the most human. And in a world finally warm, soft, open, you do not forget the frost that made you. So now, as the fire dwindles and your breath slows, rest in the knowledge that you've walked a path far older than memory, far colder than any modern fear. You have survived the unrelenting vastness of the Ice Age, not just with muscle, but with mind, with story, with one another. From the biting cold to the painted caves, from the first whispered words to the shared warmth of a single flame, your ancestors left you more than tools or bones. They left you a blueprint for resilience, a rhythm of survival, a legacy of learning, because you are not separate from them. The drive to build, to connect, to wonder, to care, to remember, did not end when the glaciers melted. It lives in your blood, in your tools, in your books and bridges and lullabies, in your cities, your technology, your art. The Ice Age didn't end. It simply evolved into you. And tonight, as you close your eyes, the Ancient Ones walk beside you, not as ghosts, but as echoes in your breath. You are the child of their fire, the heir of their struggle, the result of 1,000,000 quiet, persistent acts of survival and love. The ice tried to erase you, but it failed, because the you that survived, the true you, was never just body. It was memory, and memory endures. Sleep now, builder of futures. The long winter is over.